For the first time in their 50-year history, Cabo Verde are going to the World Cup. The Blue Sharks have landed in the USA. Now, they may be underdogs, but I would not write them off. Let's get into it. Hello, my name is Ali Howarth. I'm an African football journalist, and I was lucky enough to be in Cabo Verde when they qualified for the World Cup, the most magical moment in the country's history. And that's exactly what it was when I was there speaking to fans, speaking to people across the capital Praia. Before and after the game, everyone was unanimous. This was the biggest moment in our country's history, which is crazy. I don't know if any other country in the world could say that about this World Cup. To Cabo Verde, this is the biggest thing that's happened to them since independence. And it was particularly special because it happened exactly 50 years on from independence. They gained independence from Portugal in 1975, and 50 years later, in 2025, they qualified for the World Cup. And this is the miracle, the fairy tale that you think it is in every single aspect, in every single kind of element of it, from the players, the coaches. All of their stories are incredible. And it's also a story of excellence, right? Cabo Verde are not a team that have qualified for the World Cup because they have expanded the World Cup to 48 teams. They qualified for the World Cup because they did very well in the qualifiers, and we'll get into that in a little bit. But I just kind of want to paint the picture. In Cabo Verde, football is at the heart of everything. Like, football is the sport. Yes, they're good at handball. Yes, they're good at basketball. They're a very, very athletic country. A country that puts a lot of emphasis on sport in general. But football is the sport. And to the point where when Cabo Verde gained independence in 1975, there was essentially nowhere for them to celebrate, nowhere for them to kind of start as a country. And so they went to the Estadio de Várzea, which is the national stadium that sits right at the base of the plateau where the old town is in Praia, the capital. And that is where the first flag was ever raised. The first Cabo Verdean flag was ever raised. That's where the Constitution was read. That's where the country started. That is where the country was founded, in a football stadium. Now, they don't play at the Estadio de Várzea anymore, sadly. It's like they still use it for club football. They've got a nice AstroTurf pitch there, but the stands aren't up to nick. They want to redo it. But it means that they've been playing for the last few years in this stadium that's out of town. People don't really like it. It's a fine enough stadium built by a Chinese company, but it's a bit soulless because it's on the edge of town. It's not in the heart of Cabo Verde as this old stadium was. But when we were there to watch them qualify, and when they beat Eswatini 3-0, essentially they went straight from the stadium, the national stadium, back into town to the Estadio de Várzea, where they kind of set up this huge party for the players to celebrate with the fans. There was a stage set up, there were bars along the sides of the pitches, and the players, and again, this kind of, I want to highlight how unique Cabo Verde is in terms of a team qualifying for this World Cup. The players just were out there on the pitch mingling with fans. You wouldn't see, imagine if like England or Brazil or some of these countries did that. There was, yes, they had their own little VIP section where they could sit with their families, but a lot of them came down and just started chatting with fans. I mean, the vice captain Vozinha, legend of Cabo Verdean football, came up to me and just started chatting to me. He didn't even know who I was. He was just like, "Hey, nice to meet you. Welcome to Cabo Verde. Like, how are you finding it?" And it gives you a sense of how kind of rooted in the community the team is, how down to earth they are, how special they are. Another good example is day before the match and the biggest moment in the country's history, right, is the next day. And you would expect them to be, holed up in their hotel, just kind of focusing, keeping to themselves. No, I went to the hotel. First of all their families are there just hanging out. Like, Nuno da Costa sat there with his grandfather just having a chat. Vozinha's got a kind of young nephew or young relative there. They're all hanging out with their families. Then they all go to Sucupira Market, which is the biggest market in all of Cabo Verde, in Praia, and they essentially just walk down the road. And again, there's no security, there's no barriers. I mean, there's a couple security guys, but there's nothing separating them from people. People come up to them, chat to them, hang out, take selfies, but there's no kind of treatment of them being stars. It's like, honestly, it's like people just seeing their kind of favorite nephew on the street. Like, "Hey, how's it going? We love you." That was the kind of environment. And that is what I think makes Cabo Verde so unique as a team. And also, I think, plays into a huge part of their success. This is a really tight-knit country. This is a really tight-knit group of players. And it's a group, because of that kind of very humble culture that kind of pervades in everything they do, it means that when they step up to these big occasions, like the World Cup, like AFCONs, they don't freeze. they step up. They're calm, they're composed, and that's exactly what they were on the day. That's exactly what they did on the day against Eswatini. They beat them 3-0, very, very comfortable. Let's get into it in terms of so the qualifying, as I mentioned, a lot of people will point to it and say, look, they only qualified because we've expanded the World Cup. But they won a qualifying group that had Cameroon in it. And bear in mind, at the last World Cup, Cameroon beat Brazil. They also had Angola, who were coming off their best ever AFCON performance, where they reached the quarterfinals. And the games really, the whole thing, it was very tight between the three teams until we got to, I think it was match day 3. Match day it was the fourth last match day, actually. Cabo Verde go to Mauritius, beat Mauritius 2-0. Libya beat Angola away in Angola, and Cameroon beat Eswatini 3-0. The week before that, Cabo Verde had gone away to Angola and beaten Angola, and that essentially, those two results knocked Angola out of qualifying. And it was also the star of Dylan Livramento was born, and we'll get into Dylan Livramento in a bit. Then they play Cameroon at home, and this is the game. If Cameroon win, they're in the driving seat. If Cabo Verde win, they're in the driving seat. If they draw, it is neck and neck. And what happens? Cape Verde go and beat Cameroon 1-0. They then play Libya in this incredibly hectic 3-3 game. There was the most nuts game. I was there in Cabo Verde watching the game whilst they're playing in Libya. And it was kind of nuts what was going on. There was a crazy own goal from Pico Lopez. There was a calamitous kind of ball given away from Libya. I think it was when Cabral scored. Anyway, they then have to get the job done against Eswatini, and that's what they do. They win 3-0. Super, super powerful moment in the country's history. They qualify. And that brings us to the World Cup and to them having to compete, because I think they will compete. Now, I want to go through their team because I think that's one of the reasons that makes this team so special is the kind of cohesive nature of this team, and the fact that this team has been together for a very, very long time. So this was the team that played against Eswatini in that final game. I want to pick out a couple of players who I think are particularly key to this. So the main man is this guy, Ryan Mendes. Okay, he is the GOAT. He is the GOAT of Cabo Verdean football. He is the only player to have, well, at the World Cup, he will become, if he plays in the games, the first centurion in Cabo Verdean history. He's their all-time record cap holder, and I think he's on 96 right now. So if he plays in the warm-up games, if he then plays in the group stage, he will pass 100, the first player to ever do that. He's the top goal scorer in the country's history, I think sitting around 20 goals. He was one of the first players to move directly from Cabo Verde to Europe and not Portugal. So he moved straight from Cabo Verde. He was playing in, I think, for Mindelo, one of the islands in Sal, I think, or no, sorry, São Vicente. He went straight from there to Le Havre. Le Havre, he was there with Riyad Mahrez, he was there with Paul Pogba, Benjamin Mendy, and actually when Leicester City scout went to Le Havre and eventually signed Riyad Mahrez a couple years later, he was going to watch Ryan Mendes. And if you ask people who were at the club at the time, they would tell you Ryan Mendes was a much better player than Riyad Mahrez. And the only reason his kind of career didn't take off is he signed for Lille in 2012 to replace Eden Hazard when he had moved to Chelsea. Then he got a nasty ankle injury, and that kind of derailed his club career. And you can see he kind of had a bit of a journeyman's career from that point. But for Cabo Verde, he has always been clutch. He has always been important. He's one of the mainstays. He's one of 3 or 4 players in this team that have been with the team for well over a decade. And I think he's incredibly, incredibly important player for Cabo Verde. So let's go back to the rest of the team. Okay, in terms of a star, this is the man to watch out for, Dylan Livramento. Very, very interesting, because if you looked at his club form, you would think this guy's the furthest thing from a star. I just want to point this out. Casapia this season, 28 appearances, 0 goals. He's a center forward. He scored 0 club goals this season, which is a terrible, terrible record. But with Cabo Verde, he has scored, this is actually not right, he scored 7 in 20. So he's scored 7 goals in 2 years for Cabo Verde, which for a team like Cabo Verde is outrageous. He's already joint 6th all-time goal scorer for Cabo Verde. He's a really interesting guy. His mum was a music star from Cabo Verde. She then moved to Europe. He was born in Rotterdam. His brother is a music star. He's part of a Dutch hip-hop group called Brodevelde or something. And they were actually there for the World Cup qualifier. They performed on stage at the after party. And Dylan Livramento himself dabbles in singing with his brother and with his mom. But for Cabo Verde, he has been so, so important. I referenced the World Cup qualifying campaign. His first goals for Cabo Verde came in that World Cup qualifying campaign. When they, sorry, let me just pull it up. When the 2 goals against Angola away, both him. The 1 goal against Cameroon was him. That was a brilliant goal, kind of just mazy run through the middle of Cameroon's defense. And then he scored the first in the Eswatini game. So he's already become arguably the most important player, because Cabo Verde has this kind of rotating cast of very talented wingers and very talented wide men, kind of classic, kind of Portuguese stroke, like I would say like Mozambique and Angola, Lusophone African kind of players with a big, powerful, technical wingers who like to take on people, dribble past players, do kind of quick 1-2s, but they didn't really have a goal scorer. Dylan Livramento, despite not being a goal scorer for his club, has become that man for his country. Super, super important. Very, very interesting. And this whole team is full of these incredible stories. I mean, for instance, Joao Paulo Fernandes, he's a guy who's a victim of human trafficking when an agent told him he could move to Europe, and then he tried to move. It fell through because it was a scam. He then failed to move to Europe because of a failed work permit, and now has had a very, very good career in Romania, to the point where I think the owner of his club, FCSB, said he would go to Parliament and complain to Parliament as a former parliamentarian if he didn't get his work permit, because he was kind of struggling with that. You have Pico Lopez, legendary Irish-born centre-back, who just over 10 years ago was working as a mortgage advisor in Dublin, and then kind of got this call-up over LinkedIn. He got a message from the former Cabo Verdean coach, and he thought it was spam because he didn't speak Portuguese, and then eventually 9 months later or so, put it through Google Translate, and now is a kind of key player for the team. This team is just full of these kind of stories, really, really powerful stories. Vozinha, goalkeeper, didn't even turn professional until he's 24, when he went to Angola. So he had to go to Angola for 3 years to become a professional, and now he's going to be 40. He's turning 40 next week. He will be 40 by the time the World Cup starts, but has been a huge part of their team. This whole team is just full of these kind of stories, full of these kind of players who just mean so much. But there's one player in particular who I think is the star. And this is hard for me to pick out who's the star of this team, because there isn't really, because Ryan Mendes, whilst he's the GOAT, he's no longer the star, because he's 34, I think, 35. He's past his best. He's playing in the Turkish second division. He's kind of a bit part player. He'll start some games, he'll come off the bench other games. He's still got the quality, but he really lacks the kind of energy and pace. So I don't think he'll actually start. So let me pull up my team. And I think this is pretty much what's going to happen in terms of the team. This is the back four. Now this is the man who is the key one, Logan Costa. In a team of players who, for the most part, have had bit part careers, journeymen playing around Europe. You know, Semedo is in Cyprus, Giovanni Cabral played for Estoril in Portugal, Kevin Pina's in Russia, you know, Duarte is in Bulgaria. You know, these players have got very interesting careers and are very good players, but have kind of played around the world. Both Montero and Moreira played in the US. Moreira is still in the US. Logan Costa is the exception. He is the one elite player. He came through, he's French-born, cousin of Dylan Livramento, which again speaks to the kind of family matter. I think 7 of the players in this team have family members who've played for Cabo Verde, which again is insane. 6 of the players in this team were born in Rotterdam, and most of them kind of grew up knowing each other. Diroy Duarte's older brother, Laros, is a part of this team. Montero is from Rotterdam. Livramento has Sidney Cabral, who again, 4 years ago was playing the German 5th tier, I think, or maybe 4th tier. Now plays for Benfica. Just amazing stories all around. But Costa is the one exception. He is the one elite player. He came through at Toulouse. He scored a brace in their Coupe de France final win a couple of years ago, the first ever major trophy that they won as a centre-back. And now he's at Villarreal. And I was speaking to a Premier League scout about him a couple weeks ago, and he was saying, I wouldn't be surprised if this guy went to Barca, Real Madrid, or Atleti in the next couple of years. This is the kind of level that he's at. Unbelievable defender, tall, strong, powerful, very modern defender, very comfortable on the ball, very happy to play out, very happy to ball carry, kind of the complete package. Now, this is the big question for Cabo Verde at this tournament, because at the beginning of this season, he tore his ACL in preseason. And so he has virtually played no football this season. He came back and started training in April, and he got his first minutes in the second last game of the season for Villarreal. He's played, I think, 28 minutes. So in the last game and the second last game, he was given like 15-minute run out. So for me, that is where Cabo Verde's World Cup rests on. Does Logan Costa play? Is he fully fit? and can he make the difference? Because Dini Borges, who's come in for him, very interesting, played in Morocco, now in, I think, UAE, has done very, very well, actually. He's formed a really good partnership with Pico, very, like, solid deputy. But Costa is the elite player in this team. He is the real kind of, he's not a star because he hasn't played that much. And because in Cabo Verde, you know, stardom doesn't work the same way. You know, it's what you do for your country, not kind of the league you play in, even though he's the only player in this team that plays in one of the big 5 European leagues. That is where this kind of World Cup hangs in the balance. Now, the World Cup, let's get into the group. Because they have got a tricky and very interesting group. So they are in a group with Spain, Uruguay, and Saudi Arabia. And that is going to be tricky. Because the one thing I will say about Cabo Verde is, while they're a very defensively very solid team, Bubista, their head coach, who, again, absolute legend, such an interesting backstory. His 9 siblings. His father was a shepherd and a lift, like elevator operator. His mum was essentially worked in their family garden as a subsistence farmer whilst taking care of the kids. He, just very interesting stories. Spent time playing in Angola, Spain, Portugal. Really interesting guy. But anyway, he has made the team very, very, you know, Cabo Verde takes their inspiration from 2 cultures, footballing-wise, Brazil and Portugal. He very much is taken influence from Portugal from a tactical perspective. They're very, very good defensively. They're very, very well structured in that 4-3-3. You know, and then like essentially how they play is they play very, very structured 4-3-3. Pina, Montero in particular are decent on the ball, and they do like to play good football. They do like to play when they can. Like at the AFCON in 2024, they were probably the best team in the group stage, and they played some really, really good football. But then they also have the likes of Willy Semedo and Giovanni Cabral, very, very pacey, very physical, very direct wingers, and that's kind of how they want to play. Obviously, Spain is going to be a huge one. Very, very tough. And I think what is a huge shame in terms of where they're playing is 2 things. One, Cabo Verde will be very well supported at this World Cup. There are 500,000 Cabo Verdeans living in Cabo Verde. There are 500,000 Cabo Verdeans living in Boston, or the Boston area, right? There's more than 500,000 living in the US. There's a huge diaspora living in the US. So although we'll not see hardly any Cabo Verdeans traveling to the World Cup from Cabo Verde, there'll be plenty traveling from the European diaspora, and there will be, you know, tens and tens of thousands, maybe more, traveling from Boston and other places in the US. So it's a shame that they're not playing in Boston. I think FIFA missed a trick with not playing a lot of these games in different, you know, diaspora cities, because they're playing a pre-match warm-up game in Boston. And I think if the games were in Boston, those matches would feel like home matches for Cabo Verde. Anyway, they will have fans anyway. But the second huge thing is their first game against Spain is at the Mercedes-Benz Stadium in Atlanta. Now, I've been to the Mercedes-Benz Stadium. It's probably the best stadium in the world I've been to. It's air-conditioned. And that is a huge problem, because I think Cabo Verde, when you're looking at Spain, you're thinking, okay, what are the marginal gains we can get? Okay, can we play a game in 30, 40 degree humid heat? If we can, we're used to that in Cabo Verde. That's how we play, and used to playing away days in Africa like that, because there's a lot of African countries with that kind of weather. Unfortunately, they're playing the one game in an air-conditioned stadium, and it's this one against Spain, and I think that's going to be a tough one. However, when you look at their next 2 games, Uruguay and Saudi Arabia, Uruguay, we don't know what to expect from as a team. You know, Marcelo Bielsa is the head coach. They've had a wacky few years where they were kind of brilliant and then awful. They got smashed by the US. So there's big kind of potential there for Cabo Verde to frustrate Uruguay, particularly if Uruguay don't get a result against Saudi Arabia. And then Saudi Arabia is kind of the same. Saudi Arabia sacked Hervé Renard. They don't really know what they're doing in terms of the country and footballing identity. They got smashed 4-0 by Egypt in the March friendlies. There's not much optimism coming into this World Cup. So I think from a Cabo Verdean perspective, you're identifying those 2 games. You're saying, okay, look, Spain is a free hit. You know, can we beat Spain? Probably not. But but those next 2 games, I think they can really identify and say, look, this is the games that we can get results out of. The one thing I will say in Cabo Verde's favor is Cabo Verde as a nation always, always, always play up to the environment that they're in. So they have been in 4 different AFCONs, right? Their first ever AFCON they qualify is 2013. At that tournament, they get out of the group stages. In a group that had hosts South Africa and Morocco, and I think Angola, they were unbeaten, and they got into the quarterfinals, the AFCON. 2015, they are in a really tough group again with DRC, who reached the semi-final, as well as champions of Africa, Zambia. Now, they didn't get out of the group, but they didn't lose. They drew all 3 games. And so in kind of a modern day AFCON, that would be enough to get through, but they didn't get through there. 2021, again, very tough group. Burkina Faso, Cameroon, Ethiopia. They draw with Cameroon and they get through with 4 points. I think they lost to Burkina Faso and beat Ethiopia. And then in the 2024 AFCON, when they were in a really tough group with a decent Mozambique side and Egypt and Ghana, they topped that group and went undefeated. They drew with Egypt, beat Ghana, and smashed Mozambique 3-0 before beating Mauritania, getting to the quarterfinals, and only losing to South Africa on penalties. So Cabo Verde, every time they have played in the tournament, they have exceeded expectations. They've played 12 group games at tournaments as a nation, and they have lost once to Burkina Faso, right? Yes, they have never played someone at a competition of the caliber of Spain. They actually beat Portugal in a friendly, I think in 2015. I think it was a fairly strong Portuguese side, but Cristiano Ronaldo wasn't there, so obviously that was a huge thing in favor of Cabo Verde. So when they have played a big team, they've done all right. But that's what I'll say is they always step up. So I think a realistic ceiling for them is getting out of the group stage. I genuinely think I have more faith in them than a couple other African nations in getting out of the group stage. I really think they can do it. Now, will they come second or third? I think that really depends, because if Uruguay turn up and are playing to their best, they will beat Cape Verde. If Spain turn up and the kind of not every single thing goes in Cabo Verde's favor, Spain will beat them. With Saudi Arabia, if Saudi Arabia turn up and play their best football, I think Saudi Arabia are still a better side than Cabo Verde, but I think it's a lot closer than people give them credit for. And so I think they have a realistic chance. And I think if Uruguay don't turn up, I think there's not only a chance they go through, I think there's a chance that they actually can come second in the group. Now, the problem is if they come second in Group H, which is why I'm scrolling down, they play the winner of Group J, which will probably be Argentina. So I think a realistic ceiling for Cabo Verde is getting out of the group stage. I think the odds are still in favor of them getting knocked out in the group stage, but I think it is within their possibilities as a team to get through group stage, get to the round of 32 and get knocked out by Argentina most likely. But you never know. There's the World Cup and Cabo Verde always step up. Regardless of what they do, they will be the most beloved team at this World Cup. I'm saying it out, putting it out there because they're such a likable country. They have some of the best fans in the world because they're fans who love to party, love music. Cabo Verde has the most musicians per capita in the world as a country. It is the most musical country I have ever been to. It is incredible. And they have a huge diaspora in the US, so they will travel well. So regardless of what happens, you should be watching their games. You should be supporting them because they are brilliant. And I think we will all, by the end of this World Cup, know how brilliant Cabo Verde are.